listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast by Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb, Dr. Frederick J. Long, Dr. Mario Melendez, Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and J. M. Smith. Welcome and enjoy.
Shalom, this is Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and welcome to your weekly SLA Insights. We've been talking about meaning-based instruction in the last episode, and talking about how this is what promotes the implicit knowledge of the language that you're learning. So we've been talking more theoretically about this concept. So today I want to kind of break it down more into a practical sense and what it might look like to use meaning-based instruction in your classroom. To give us a running start, I want to back up just a little bit to kind of review the theoretical stuff very quickly, but then look at some practical ways to incorporate meaning-based instruction into your teaching and learning of your language. So, as we talked about last time, meaning-based instruction is what's used to promote the acquisition of implicit language knowledge. And implicit language knowledge is that knowledge that you can use, that's accessible, that you use automatically, but you don't always know that you have it. Kind of like muscle memory, where it's there, you can make use of it, but you can't always talk about it or explain it in rules or paradigms, that kind of thing. So that implicit knowledge then is one of the three components of language proficiency and what makes you good at knowing a language. So along with implicit knowledge, we have explicit knowledge and automaticity. But today we're just focusing on meaning-based instruction and how that promotes implicit language learning. So we talked about last week how meaning-based instruction involves input and interaction, and its primary focus is, as its name implies, meaning. So you're using the language for communication with meaning. Now, that excludes rote memorization of rules, grammar rules, paradigms, that kind of thing. We're talking about actual language that's being used to communicate or receive a message of some sort. So with that then, as I said, meaning-based instruction breaks down into two important components. One is input and the other is interaction. So let's look at input and what that means and what it might mean for your class. So input focuses on two of the four language skills. That is specifically listening and reading. You're receiving messages in the language. That would be input. Now, output focuses on the other two, writing and speaking. Now, for ancient languages, we focus primarily on reading the written text. That is the primary form of input that we and our students use and work with and receive. So I'm going to start with that part of input and talk about that as increasing that to and using it as part of meaning-based instruction. So input, you're reading the text, you're getting messages from the text, and you're reading it as a text, not as something to be analyzed for its grammar. You're using it to receive the message that's encoded in that text. That's the meaning-based piece of it. Now, in future episodes, we're going to talk about how the ancient texts, especially if we're talking the Bible or ancient Latin manuscripts, church documents, that kind of thing. If we're dealing with those, they are almost always above our students. They're beyond what they know. And so we're going to talk in future episodes about ways to simplify that input, to make it comprehensible, make it accessible so they can use texts for gaining input, meaning-based input. But for now, just be aware that reading and more reading is really going to help them, and you, if it's you that's the learner, to gain implicit language knowledge. Do a lot of reading as much as you can, and make sure, again, that you're doing it in the language and that you're doing it for the purpose of meaning and understanding the text. Again, we're not using it as a textbook for learning grammar. We're using it for input, for language input. The other form of language input is listening and listening to language. Now, you could do this by using an audio Bible. There are people who read the Bible in Hebrew, in Greek, in Aramaic, and you can use that to get auditory input. But you can also use it in your class. And if you've never done this before, start small. Do a simple, hi, how are you? But start being able to label and talk about things that are going on in your classroom. You have a whiteboard up front. You can call it in Hebrew a luach, the tablet up there. You can talk about talmidim, your students, and don't feel bad about going back and forth between Hebrew and English. As much as you can, give them input, meaningful input. And as you do that, that's going to help develop their implicit language knowledge. Then the second aspect of meaning-based instruction that's necessary is interaction. And this is the idea that it's a back and forth, that you're not just one side of the conversation, but you've got two people, one giving, one receiving, and then they switch. It's back and forth. This one talks, then that one talks, and they're both listening and engaging and trying to communicate something back and forth. Now, again, this can be done either verbally out loud, or it can be done in writing. So because written input is what we primarily have for the ancient languages, I'm going to start with writing, but then we're going to move to the speaking and listening aspect of it. So for written interaction, you can ask your students to write letters to one another, to read what each other has written. Give them an assignment that says, hey, tell them about what you did yesterday. Write it down in 2 or 3 sentences and hand it off to the partner, whoever that is. Maybe switch papers and then read it and write a response of some kind. Or pretend like you're a long-lost relative and you're writing them a letter. Hey, how are you? What have you been doing lately? And then switch, and they have to answer the questions in the language. And again, that's the interactive part of it, getting them to communicate back and forth and giving information that they may not have known already. You can do things like, what is the color of your neighbor's shirt? But there's only one answer and everybody already knows what it is. So give them something that will require them to understand something they probably don't know already. They probably don't know what their partner did last week. And so give them an opportunity to communicate back and forth in writing. The advantage of writing written interaction, is that you have more time to read and interpret the message. You don't have a teacher standing there looking at you going, give me an answer, I'm waiting, and you get nervous waiting, trying to figure out what to say. So you have time to understand it and read it over 2 and 3 times if you need to. The other advantage is you have more time to compose your message and your response back. So there are definitely advantages to using written interaction to help students develop that implicit language knowledge. Now, the other thing that you can do is to do the spoken. And this takes more time and more effort, and it's definitely more uncomfortable, especially for those of us who were not taught using this approach. If you weren't taught to speak Hebrew, it's a lot harder to get there. But I would encourage you to try it, because there's also some advantages to doing it out loud in person, that interaction. One of them is immediate feedback. And if you know from general education, you know that the sooner you get the feedback, the more effective it is, and the more you're going to help your learner. The other thing is you can do fix any breakdowns in communication as they happen. If there's a breakdown in communication in something written, it takes longer. If you're in class and your partner's right next to you, you can do it faster. But if it's something done over weeks or months, you don't know, you can't fix any breakdown in communication quickly. It's going to take some back and forth before you can get there. So the immediate feedback and the immediate working through negotiation of meaning that happens when there's a breakdown in communication. Maybe the person who started the conversation didn't use the right word or didn't use the right form. Maybe the person listening doesn't know that word or form, and they have to stop and say, wait, I don't understand. What do you mean? And so those kinds of things, it happens much more quickly if you can do it in person, verbally out loud. Another benefit of the auditory interaction, the out loud speaking and listening, is that language is encoded in your auditory memory, even if it's written language. And so when you're reading, whether you're aware of it or not, you're doing what's called subvocalization. You're hearing the words internally, even if you're reading silently. So the importance of getting good auditory input into your students, is you're helping to develop that language, that auditory aspect that will carry over into the reading and writing of your language. You need that auditory input to help imprint the implicit language knowledge that you are developing. And so look for ways to create conversation, to get students to interact verbally out loud, as well as in writing. And again, keep it meaning focused. So do the input, get them reading, get them listening, look for ways to create interaction, and keep it meaning focused. So memorizing a paradigm is not meaning based. You can do that without having any idea what you're reading. For meaning-based instruction, don't do here are a series of verbs, circle the verb ending. Students can do that without knowing what those words mean. Look for ways that will help them focus on the meaning. And the good news is, at least for things like Hebrew and even a little bit in Greek, you can have a whole sentence in one word. That verb carries the subject and the verb itself. And so you can use that one word, and it can be very simple, but it is in itself a sentence. It can carry meaning, and you can use maybe photographs or hand drawings to say, okay, what picture does this go with? And there they've got a meaning-based activity that's getting input in the language. It's focused on meaning. They have to know the meaning of the word to be able to match the picture to the Hebrew word or Greek word or whatever it is. And that will get you a long ways towards developing that implicit language knowledge. So for today, we covered some more practical ways to get input and interaction into your teaching. In future episodes, we're going to really pull it apart, talk about what is comprehensible input, how we do sociolinguistics and interaction, but just to help you get some practical sense of what I'm talking about when we're looking at meaning-based instruction. So for some upcoming episodes, I'm going to start looking at form-focused instruction and hopefully get some practical examples in there. And then for automaticity and how to develop that through practice and also meaning-based instruction. We're going to come back to that for automaticity. So thanks for listening. I want you to have a great week.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.